Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a pretty big mission, trying to navigate the often confusing world of security architecture.
hmm
Our real goal here is to get past the buzzwords, like zero trust, and build a solid understanding of how organizations actually go about protecting their valuable stuff, their assets.
Exactly. And we've gathered quite a bit of material, stuff covering core data governance, those classic security models you hear about, even cryptographic key management, right up to the latest NIST guidance on modern defense strategies.
Right.
So by the end of this, you should really grasp those key differences like who's accountable versus just responsible, why sometimes more complexity means more risk, not less, and how these newer architectures are flipping the old security thinking on its head.
Okay, let's dive in, starting right at the beginning. The data itself. I mean, before we even talk firewalls or encryption, we have to know what we're protecting. So why is formal data classification like the foundational step, not just optional?
Well, because security costs money, right? Time, resources, and you just can't protect everything equally. It's not practical.
Makes sense.
So the main reason for classification is to figure out an asset's actual value. How important is it to the organization? Once you know that, is it public? Is it internal, proprietary? Or is it really sensitive, confidential? Then you can decide the right level of protection.
Okay.
If you overspend protecting public info, that's waste. But if you underprotect the confidential stuff, well, that could be disastrous.
And that classification decision, that sort of kicks off the whole security structure, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The sources point to a clear hierarchy. You start with a data classification policy that defines the levels, assigns accountability. What flows from that?
Yeah, pretty much everything else. From that policy, you derive standards. So technical rules like maybe all confidential data needs AES 256 encryption.
Got it.
Then come the procedures. These are the step-by-step guides. How do you classify data? How do you actually implement that encryption standard?
The actual how-to.
Exactly. And finally, baselines. These set the minimum security level needed for any system that handles data of a certain classification, like a floor you can't drop below.
This structure immediately makes us think about roles. And this is where accountability gets really interesting. You've got people making decisions, people doing the work. Who actually carries the strategic burden here?
The strategic weight. That lands squarely on the data owner, or sometimes called the data controller. This is usually someone senior, like a business unit head. They are accountable for protecting that data. They decide its classification.
Accountable, that's the key word.
Absolutely. If there's a breach, the buck stops with them, organizationally speaking, even if the technical failure was somewhere else.
So if the owner is accountable, who's responsible for, the day-to-day heavy lifting?
Okay, so you've got two main players for responsibility. First, the data custodian. This role is all about technical responsibility. They're the ones setting up the controls, running backups, managing storage, making sure things are up and running.
The IT folks often.
Often, yeah. Then you have the data steward. Their focus is more on the business responsibility. Things like data governance, ensuring data quality, meeting compliance rules, both internal and external.
Okay, hold on. Let's tease that apart. Say a data owner labels patient records highly confidential.
Right.
But the data custodian, maybe they mess up configuring the backups, and poof, data's gone. Who's really on the hook? Legally or organizationally? The person who clicked the wrong setting or the person who set the highly confidential rule?
That's a great question, and it trips people up. The data owner is still ultimately accountable. They carry the organizational, maybe financial consequences because they own the responsibility for the overall protection framework.
Even though they didn't make the technical mistake.
Correct. The custodian. They failed their responsibility. They might face internal consequences, sure, but legally, strategically, the accountability rests with the owner or controller who set the policy and classification.
That clarity is really vital. Okay, let's just slightly to the legal side. These roles operate under legal obligations, due care versus due diligence. Why is it so important for organizations to demonstrate both?
It comes down to liability, really. Due care is about taking reasonable steps. It's setting the expected standard of protection for the organization's assets. Think of it like senior management saying, okay, we need multi-factor authentication for anyone accessing highly confidential data. That policy decision, that's due care. They've set the bar.
Okay, setting the bar. And due diligence is checking the bar.
Exactly. Due diligence is the ongoing work to make sure those steps are actually happening and are effective. It's auditing systems to see if MFA is really enforced everywhere it should be. It's testing your disaster recovery plan. It's finding gaps and fixing them.
So you can't just buy the fancy security tool and walk away.
No way. If you just install the system, that's care, but never check if it's working correctly or configured right, that's diligence. You haven't met your legal obligation. Proving due diligence is critical if you face legal action or a regulatory audit.
Okay, so data's classified, roles assigned, legal duties understood. What happens at the very end of the data lifecycle? We need defensible destruction, making sure it's gone, provably gone. The sources list a hierarchy here, best to worst. What's the absolute top tier?
Gold standard. Physical destruction. Shredding, melting, burning, pulverizing the actual media. If the physical thing holding the data is just gone, disintegrated, then the data is gone, period.
Makes sense. Hard to argue with a puddle of melted plastic.
Yeah.
What's the next best, maybe more practical for digital stuff?
That would be purging. Purging uses techniques to ensure the data cannot be reconstructed, even with fancy forensic lab tools. The best example here is crypto shredding.
Ah, yes. Heard of that.
You encrypt the data really well using a strong key. Then you securely and irrevocably destroy just the key. The encrypted data might still technically exist as gibberish on the disk, but without the key. It's logically gone, unrecoverable, purged.
Okay, so destruction and purging are the cannot recover options.
Yeah.
Where do things get a bit iffy?
That's where clearing comes in. Clearing uses logical methods like overwriting the data, multiple times wiping. Sounds okay, right?
Yeah, I thought wiping was pretty good.
Well, the issue is, sometimes sophisticated forensic tools can still pick up faint magnetic traces left on the drive platters. The sources describe this as ensuring data may not be reconstructed. That may not isn't very comforting for sensitive data.
Right, not exactly reassuring. And I bet everyone listening has an old USB drive they just formatted once, thinking that did the job.
Oh, absolutely the worst method. Formatting just removes the pointers in the file table. Most of the actual data bits are often still sitting there, plain as day, and really easy to get back with basic recovery software. Definitely not defensible destruction.
Okay, moving from policy and getting rid of data to actually designing the security, let's look at the architectural blueprints, the security models. These are interesting because they're often quite abstract, sometimes focusing on just one aspect, like confidentiality or integrity. Let's start with the two big classics.
Right, you're talking Bella Padula and Biba. These are foundational, lattice-based models. Bella Padula is all about confidentiality. Think military classifications. If you have secret clearance, you can't read a top-secret document. It enforces no read-up, strict confidentiality control.
Secret.
Yeah.
Biba does the opposite.
Pretty much. Biba is laser-focused on integrity. The goal here is to stop data at a lower integrity level, maybe from an untrusted source, or user from corrupting data at a higher integrity level. The rule is basically no write-down. You can't have high-integrity processes writing potentially bad data down to lower levels. Keeps the good data clean.
So Bella Padula handles secrets, Biba handles accuracy. But what if you need more? Like, what if an authorized user could still make an improper change? Is there a model for that broader integrity concept?
Yes, that's where the Clark-Wilson model comes in. It's rule-based and provides a much wider view of integrity. It has three main goals: stop unauthorized changes, stop authorized users making bad changes, and keep the whole system consistent.
How does it do that?
The key concept is often separation of duties enforced by the system. Think about an accounting system. One person might enter a transaction that's an authorized action, but Clark-Wilson might require a different authorized user to approve that transaction before it's final. Prevents one person from messing things up, intentionally or not.
Okay, these models are like blueprints. But organizations need to know if the actual products, the firewalls, the operating systems built using these ideas are actually secure. That leads to third-party evaluations. The historical big one was the Orange Book, right?
Ah, the Orange Book. Officially, the Trusted Computer System Evaluation Criteria, or TCSEC. Huge deal back in the 80s from the U.S. Department of Defense. But yeah, it had limits. It really only measured confidentiality, and it was designed for standalone computers, not the networked world we live in now.
It got replaced eventually. There was ITSEC in Europe, but what's the global standard today for evaluating product security?
That would be the common criteria, or ISO 15408. This is the one you see referenced everywhere now. To make sense of it, you need to know three main pieces. First, the protection profile, PP. This describes what a whole category of products is supposed to do security-wise, like here's what a typical firewall needs to achieve.
The generic requirements.
Right. Second, the target of evaluation, TOE. That's the specific product being tested, like, say, Palo Alto Firewall Model ABC.
The actual thing.
Exactly. And third, the security targets, ST. This is the vendor saying, here's what our specific product, the 2OE, claims to do security-wise, and they have to show how those claims meet the requirements laid out in the protection profile.
Okay, PPTOEST.
Well,
Got it. And the part most people might recognize are the ratings, the evaluation assurance levels, EALs, EL1 up to EL7. Now, here's where our sources point out something really counterintuitive. EL7 is the highest, most rigorous level, but often organizations avoid EL7 products. Why wouldn't you want the maximum security rating?
Yeah, this is super important and often misunderstood. Achieving those really high assurance levels like EAL6 or EAL7 demands incredible complexity. Complexity in the design and the verification process and ongoing maintenance.
That's just too hard.
It's often seen that way.
Yep.
EAL4 is pretty common for things like firewalls, maybe EAL3 for a standard operating system. Why? Because customers and the industry generally want a balance. The sources highlight that extreme complexity makes a system much harder to deploy correctly, harder to manage day to day, and harder to monitor effectively. And that complexity can actually increase the risk of mistakes, misconfigurations, or hidden flaws.
So paradoxically, aiming for the absolute highest theoretical security can make it less secure in practice.
Precisely. EAL7 is often viewed as too expensive, too operationally burdensome, and potentially, ironically, a bigger risk liability in the real world.
Wow. That idea that maximum complexity can breed maximum risk, that's actually a perfect transition.
Yeah.
If these traditional complex perimeter defenses and evaluations show us limitations, how do we build architectures that manage risk differently, perhaps more dynamically? Which brings us right to Zero Trust Architecture, or ZTA.
ZTA, yes, it's the big paradigm shift happening now. It really gained steam because everyone realized the old perimeter, that firewall at the network edge, just wasn't reliable anymore. You've got remote workers everywhere, people using their own devices, BYOD, tons of cloud services. The network boundary basically dissolved.
It's blurry at best.
Exactly. So ZTA starts with a core assumption. There is no implicit trust just because something or someone is on the network. Location doesn't grant trust anymore.
Okay, so if ZTA isn't focused on locking down the network perimeter, because that's kind of gone, what is it focused on protecting?
It flips the focus entirely to protecting the resources, the actual data, the applications, the services, specific workflows. It's a mindset shift. Authentication and authorization aren't just one-time checks at the door. They are distinct steps performed continuously, looking at both the user and the device they're using, its health, its posture, before any connection to a resource is allowed. Trust has to be earned constantly.
Okay, let's break down the machinery. What are the core pieces that make ZTA function? Who makes the decisions? Who enforces them?
All right, the core logic sits with the policy engine, PE, and the policy administrator, PA. The PE is the brain. It makes the final call, does this user on this device meet the rules to access that resource? The PA is where those rules are set up and managed. These guys operate in what's called the secure control plane.
So PE decides, PA configures, who's the bouncer at the door?
That's the policy enforcement point, PEP. Think of it as a gatekeeper, often a gateway or agent. It doesn't make the decision itself, but once the PE gives the green light, the PEP is what actually establishes the communication path between the user, the subject, and the resource they requested.
And the PE makes this decision based on a trust algorithm. How does that actually work? Is it just a checklist?
It can work a couple of ways, generally. It might be criteria-based. This means a specific list of conditions must all be met, like correct location, device fully patched, MFA passed, time of day is right, all boxes checked, access granted. Or it could be score-based. This is more dynamic. It takes various signals, user behavior, device health, threat intelligence, feeds, assigns weights to them, and calculates an overall confidence score. If that score passes a certain threshold, then access is granted. It allows for more nuance.
Connecting this back to the architecture, ZTA seems heavily reliant on keeping the management stuff separate from the actual user traffic, right?
Oh, absolutely critical. You mentioned the control plane. That's where the PE, PA, and PBP talk to manage access decisions. That must be logically separate from the data plane. The data plane is only for the actual application traffic flowing between the user who got approved and the resource they're using.
Why is that separation so vital?
It prevents interference.
Yeah.
You don't want regular user traffic flooding or potentially manipulating the control systems making the access decisions. And you don't want control traffic slowing down the user's actual work. Keep keeps things clean and secure.
Okay, so given that this PIPA combo is now the central nervous system for all access across the whole company, what's the absolute nightmare scenario? The biggest threat ZTA introduces?
The single biggest catastrophic threat: subversion of the PIPA. If an attacker manages to compromise the policy engine or the administrative interface, they effectively hold the keys to the kingdom. They could rewrite access rules for anything, grant themselves access anywhere, lock legitimate users out. It's game over.
So protecting the PIPA itself is paramount.
It's non-negotiable. That means super strict configuration management, constant monitoring, change control, and immutable logs tracking every single policy modification. You have to guard the guards.
And what if they are compromised but just go offline, like a DOS attack?
That's the other major operational risk. If the PE or PA infrastructure gets knocked offline by a denial of service attack or even just a network outage, then potentially no one can get access to anything. Because if the decision engine can't make a trust decision, the PPs won't grant access.
The whole enterprise grinds to a halt.
Potentially, yes. Which means you need serious high availability and redundancy built in for those core ZTA components. Think multiple instances, maybe secure cloud hosting with replication, failover.
Yeah.
You cannot let the brain go offline.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from why data value is the starting point and the specific roles needed, through those core security models like Bella Padula and Biba, and the nitty-gritty of evaluation criteria like common criteria.
Yeah, and I think the key thread connecting it all is how these concepts build on each other. Policy sets the stage based on value. Defined roles carry out the necessary care and diligence. Formal evaluations try to provide assurance.
Right.
And Zero Trust essentially takes all those lessons and says, okay, the old perimeter model is broken. Let's focus protection tightly on the resources themselves and make trust something that has to be explicitly continuously proven, not just assumed based on location.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. We talk about how common criteria, the top evaluation standard, often leads organizations to prefer a moderate rating like EAL4 over the absolute maximum EAL7. The reason: extreme complexity can actually make systems harder to manage securely, increasing real-world risk. So if maximum theoretical security can sometimes introduce maximum practical risk due to complexity, take a moment and think. Where in your own work, or maybe even your personal life, are you relying on overly complex, high-friction controls that feel super secure, but might actually be your hidden single point of failure? Something to chew on.